three guys in this picture. On the this side, that's Art Chrisman, and this is his boss, Danny Eames, and the guy in the middle is Alex Xydias. Alex was the proprietor of SoCal Speed Shop in the 40s and early 50s. I think it ran as late as 1960. He closed the shop up because he wanted to be a filmmaker, kind of like you, Pitts.
Dream on, right?
And he made a thing called the Hot Rod Story, and he'll appreciate the plug because he's still selling them after 40 years. And Alex was the guy I worked for. I don't know, 7 or 8 years as editor of Hot Rod Industry News. He was the publisher, and he was a great guy. He was a little tight when it came to expenses. I spent $17 one time on a trip to Bakersfield, and he says, "Do we really need to spend that kind of money going to a race when we just went to the Winter Nationals?" There was no convincing him that it was more important to go to Bakersfield than it was the Winter Nationals, but you wanted me to go. And he ended up purchasing he and Mickey purchased the off-road show, and he ran it. We had run the SEMA show together, so he was pretty familiar with how that operated. Mickey drew him out of Peterson, put him in charge of the show. He made it a world beater, and they sold it, and he made a lot of money. And so he's been coasting ever since. Pete Shaporis of SoCal, the current SoCal Speed Shop, went to Alex and said, "Listen, I want to call this place the SoCal Speed Shop, and I want you to be involved, and I want your blessing." And of course, Alex was ecstatic about that whole thing, and it has really worked out nice. And now he's the chairman of the board of the Peterson Museum, the NHRA Museum, which is a great choice because he's an emotional guy who can really pitch people when he wants to get revenue for the museum and things like that, and very warm individual. He's approaching 90, I think, so he's a great guy. Really like him. Next guy, Leonard Van Leuven. Leonard Van Leuven was a drag racer of considerable merit. He raced with Tommy Dyer and Hippo, and he was the guy that put the blower on Garlitz's car after Garlitz got beat at the first March meet. He was making things called van chargers, which was a supercharger, 671, that he'd gone through and made sure all the clearances were proper and the gears were good and stuff like that. And he fabricated the manifold or gathered up the manifold and had Iskey build the drive, and then they put the 8 carburetors on top of that supercharger. And they went to Kingdon and blew everybody away. And Garlitz proved that he was real. He came out here, they were still skeptical about his 176-mile-an-hour run. And it was long before Art had run 180 at Riverside. So Garlitz's reputation was building. And when they brought him out to run Bakersfield, and he didn't win, the West Coast guys were still kind of snickering. But when he got through at Kingdon and smoked them all with a supercharger that he'd never run before, he'd always run carburetors on all his motors, and they put that blower on that thing and it zinged. And of course, whipped everybody in the process. And Van was the guy that bolted that together and saw to it that Garlitz had all the right information and the right camshaft, because the camshaft for an unblown motor apparently is a great deal of difference to a blown motor in those days. And he later raced with the guys the car that's just being restored, the Killing and Clayton car. He helped them a great deal with that car. And he worked for Donovan, and he worked for Iskey, and he was just a great all-around racer. Loved him. The next guy is my skinny pal, Neil Leffler. Leffler's the guy that had an A competition coupe from Parma, Ohio, with a blown Chrysler, a 471 with a two-holer. And he came to Bakersfield and beat the Speed Sport Special head up. One of the best races I've ever witnessed. That was really something. And he had like the new modern funny cars that got that flap on the top of the car. He had one, but when he put it up in the air like that, it said on it, "Not ready, starter," telling the starter that he's not ready to go to the starting line. When he dropped that down, he was ready to stage. He and I and Madden run together for a while. He had me make him some valves. He found a couple of blanks in a automotive shop where the valve had the stem ground but nothing for the head, and he gave those to me, and I took them down when I was working for Joe Hunt, and I copied all of the shapes of the valve that was already in the Chrysler, and we didn't know anything about heat treatment or anything like that, and we tuliped them suckers first round. I mean, it pulled halfway up into the port. So that was our misadventure in making our own valves. And Donovan came up with his 80-10 stainless, 90-10, 80-20 stainless valves that everybody ran, and they lived like a Stone Age man. Next guy, Lanny Sixth, Beebe Brothers and Sixth. Dave Beebe drove. Tim Beebe put the car all together, and Lanny Sixth put the motor in it. And they were some kind of terrors. They owned Long Beach. They did really well at Irwindale. They raced, Beebe raced Mulligan for King of Garden Grove in Adams and Ware's car. There was some terrific racing in those days. Lanny kind of disappeared when that car went on to be the Beebe and Mulligan car. It was the first green Beebe and Mulligan car, and I guess it's being restored now back to the original Beebe Brothers and Sixth car. Yeah. And that ought to be interesting to see that car run again, or at least cackle.
Yeah, come to life.
One of the great racers from Bakersfield, Tony Waters. Tony Waters was runner-up to Chrisman. Had Chrisman covered because Chrisman had split a cylinder wall and spun out because of that short coupled little roadster he had, and Chrisman won the meet. But he was damn close. And there are lots of folks, particularly the Bakersfield contingent, that say that Tony really won that race, but we know better, don't we? And Tony's still running. He runs an A-Fuel nostalgia car, and I think he's got a Streamliner going, or some kind of Bonneville car going. Still very active, and he's well into his 80s for sure. He was pals with Ernie Hashem. Wayne King drove for him. I'll mention him again when we get to Mike Sorokin. There were a bunch of racers, and of course he drove the car himself early on, so he knows all about it. Go Fast, Jimmy Bresett. Bresett and Sutherland. Bresett and Yates and Alexander. Now Roger Lee's baby. He went fast everywhere he went. You did not want to get Bresett first round because he was going to kill you, but there's a good chance that he would blow it up in the process. If you had a 10,000 square foot building and you had all of the Chryslers that Bresett's blew up, you wouldn't have room to get in. He was not concerned with what happened to the motor. He just wanted to go fast, and go fast he did. 209, I think it was his first record, then 217, then 220 something. I mean, he went fast everywhere he went. next gentleman is a real gentleman, Frank Xydias. Frank Xydias started San Fernando drag strip, known fondly as the Frog Pond. And he and Dave Wallace Sr. Made that strip into a really fun place to drag race, with a limitation of running a top fuel show between 12 noon and 3 p.m. And everybody cooperated, and we had a great time. And I don't remember anybody fighting over anything at San Fernando. It just went kind of lickety-split. The surfers and Tom killed them out there. John Harbert did good with Bobby Tapia. We even had fast time one weekend out there, Madden and I. And it was just a great place to race. It was a shame that it went away. It was for those who are in the other parts of the world, San Fernando was a taxiway next to the runway at San Fernando Airport. And on one side was a giant flood control ditch, cemented in with huge rocks in the cement to break up the speed of the water. And at the very end was a bridge. Several people ran into that bridge. A couple of them died as a result. I think the fastest anybody ever went was 220 out there before they closed it down. And the parachutes got pretty reliable at some point, and so they were able to stop. We didn't have any more of those kinds of incidents. But there was one incident where Pedregon drove it down there and turned it over, and he got out and laid on the ground like he was dead. and Harry Hibbler goes running down there on this little motorcycle, and Pedregon jumps up and goes, "Ta-da, I'm alive!" And Harry wanted to kill him, because it scared the hell out of him. You know, he's the strip manager at that point. He's the guy that ran the races. As other people ran the racetrack, but he ran the races, and it just terrified him. And I think Pedregon didn't want to do that again. Another old pal, Frank Hedge, better known as Root Beer Frank. Root Beer Frank raced top fuel with Leffler and I and Madden, and we all hung around together and traded parts. And one weekend when the car was broke, he loaned me the motor, and then vice versa. Madden would put his motor in there, and Leffler put his parts on it. And Leffler ended up crashing the one really long car that Frank had built at Lyons. Turned it over big time. Wasn't hurt, but it was the nicest looking and the fastest of the Frank car, Root Beer Frank cars. We did a piece in Drag Racing Magazine where we took the car to the A&W Root Beer stand, and we had Leffler sitting in the cockpit with his helmet on but no face mask, and we had a serving tray hung on the windshield with a hamburger and a malt, and we really had a good time with that particular story, just going through people's reaction to seeing this thing parked in the drive-in. Those were the days when we could do silly things like that. Jeep Hampshire, that's him, concerned about his tires.